Looks like you made it in, James.
I did indeed.
Cool.
Can you hear me all right?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, perfect.
For once, we don't have anybody joining early. No. No sooner do I say that. All right, I'm going to go on mute until right before. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to give it just a couple of minutes for everybody to join us, and then we'll get started. All right, we're going to go ahead and get going here. James, you want to turn your video on with me?
Absolutely.
Let me get mine on. All right. Looks good. All right, guys, we got a few quick housekeeping items. Can I get somebody to confirm they can see your screen, see our video, hear us all right, all that fun stuff? Great. Thanks, Mike. All right, cool. We are recording today's webinar. You'll get a email out tomorrow with a link to the recap. It'll have both the deck and the recording on it. You can also reply to that if you have any additional questions for myself or James. Happy to play air traffic control. Set you up with a demo or a rep if you want to learn more about what either of us do here at Sales Intel or Reggie, anything like that. So please feel free to reply to that, and then we'll try our best to give ourselves a few minutes for Q&A here at the end. As we're going through this, please go ahead and drop your questions in the Zoom side panel so that you don't lose track of those, and we'll do our best to make sure that we've got a few minutes. I don't have a hard stop. I don't know if you do, James. So if we're having a good Q&A, I can hang around basically as long as you guys have good questions for us.
Absolutely. No, happy to hang out for a while.
Cool. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get going then. My name's Jason. I'm Vice President of Partnerships and Alliances here at Sales Intel. And you're here with Sales Intel Reggie. We're going to demystify the 3 Ps of modern selling. So you have with you today, like I said, I'm Jason Hubbard, Vice President of Partnerships and Alliances. And then excited to have you with us, James from Reggie.
Hey, thank you. No, I'm really glad to be here. I'm James. I'm the SVP of Customer Operations at a little organization called Reggie, which helps people build better campaigns that convert. So
Great.
Excited to be here discussing this topic.
No, excited to have you on here. I mean, Reggie is really one of our ideal partners because we both, have a similar thing that we have to tackle, which is, reps are only so good as the tools they have and how well they are to put those tools to use. So for sequencing tools or cadence tools like outreach, sales loss, stuff like that. On our side, on the Sales Intel side, if you don't have enough high quality data to feed your sequences, then the tool's not going to be very effective. On the flip side is if you're not doing a very good job of building your sequences and building your content, then obviously they're not going to do a whole lot for you. Which happens to be exactly what Reggie helps you out with. So, excited about this partnership. Really, kind of a match made in heaven that we're helping to solve 2 pieces of the puzzle for sales. All right, real quick agenda today. This one's dead simple. We're going to keep this really, really conversational. This will not be a deck or slide driven presentation. This is going to be me and James largely just talking through this. And again, welcome you guys to drop questions that you have for us as we're going through this. But the 3 Ps that are in the title are pain, persona, and personalization. And that's what we're going to spend most of our time going through. So first up is persona. Persona is absolutely critical for the effectiveness of your sales and marketing campaigns for that matter. You obviously need to know who your audience is, who you're talking to, both so that you're building out the right collateral, you're using the right language, you're talking to the right pain points, but also so that you're targeting the people that are actually likely to convert. Obviously, if you're spray and praying, or if you're off as far as what your ICP and your personas are, ICP being ideal customer profile for anybody that's not familiar with it, then those campaigns are obviously not going to be very effective. So James, what on your guys' end are really the keys for nailing persona?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is I get really excited about persona. Persona is like one of my favorite things to talk about, especially with folks that are just now getting into it and really trying to grow their outbound prospecting, or even trying to refine their inbound prospecting. It's interesting. Before I came to Reggie, I worked at a company called Sapper Consulting for a number of years, where we would basically do the outbound engine for every customer that came in. And part of that process was determining what is their ideal customer profile, right? And I like to start very simply with it and then expand out from there. So I like to start very simply with, like, you designed a service or a product or whatever it is that you're trying to sell. Who's going to get the most use out of it? Who's going to really want to buy that? And what types of companies are going to want to buy that? Whether it's mid-market, Fortune 500, so on or so forth. Like, figuring out the size of company first, and then really drilling down from there on who you want to be talking to, who's going to actually be buying your product, is where I like to start from that perspective. And it's cool because I've found that when you start wide like that and narrow yourself down, you give yourself a little bit more to play with. So you can start thinking about not just your buyers, but your influencers. And then from there, you can start to develop strategy on how to engage with all of these people. So the place that I would start is really ask yourself, knowing your understanding of your business, like, who's going to get the most use out of this thing that I'm offering? And then, leveraging the data insights and whatnot that you might have, go from there. But even if you don't have anything and you're just starting off totally bare bones, you can still figure out generally what that ideal customer will be. And it depends a lot too on, like, the size of the organization. Like I mentioned. So if you're going after, really small organizations, like, your CEO is probably going to be your main point of contact. If you're in that 10 to 50 range, looking at the VP who has the highest level product value fit for you would be there. And then as you get bigger than that, you go 5,500, more than 500, you're going to start to see more specialized roles in there, from the director level to management level, so on and so forth. And the deeper that you go in that, you can do some really cool things, because once you've got your buyer indicated, you can start doing outreach to them directly in a way, hopefully, that will get them to convert. But another thing that you can do very easily once you've mapped that out is you can start to identify influencers at different organizations. So looking at, how does my product or my service affect the folks downline from my buyer and upline from my buyer, so that you can do really targeted outreach to them in a way that will get people at that organization talking about your product or business. And I think that there's a lot that you can do there, Jason, to your point, with, like, the data sets and the buyer intent, you can kind of unpiece all of those things together. But the simplest place to start, and one place that I really like to start with it, is I love to build out almost like a buyer persona matrix. So it can be as simple as, like, a spreadsheet that just outlines the different traits and values that you look for in your buyer. And then from there, you can start to extrapolate those different influencers. And then suddenly you've got this nice sheet that outlines everything that you look for in a potential customer. And from there, then you can really start to build upon how that conversation flow should go, how you should introduce the pain, and then how, and which we'll talk about later on, how you can make that a little bit more personal downline.
Awesome. There's a few things that you said there that I really want to hit upon. First off is it should really be personas, plural, not persona. So depending on who you're selling into, which one of the segments, because almost everybody's going to have multiple segments that they're selling into.
Exactly.
Personas are going to be different. Also, I mean, as everybody loves to harp upon, average, B2B sales now has more than 8 decision makers at the table. So even selling into the same ICP, the same industry, same category, you're going to have multiple personas within each one of those and within each one of those companies. So keep that in mind. Each one of those personas, each one of those decision makers are going to have different pain points. They're going to speak a different language. They're going to have different things that they're interested in. And so you're going to need to hit on each of those. Another big piece of it is the data-driven side of it that you mentioned. So even if you're starting completely from scratch, it's not going to take you long until you've got some data. And then if you've been at it for any time at all, you're going to have some sort of information and data out there. Go and look into and dive into that data. Where have you had successes, but equally importantly, where have you not been successful? And then don't just take those successes or lack of success as all that there is to it. Dig into it. Try and figure out, why were you successful? Why were you not successful? Come up with hypotheses, test these. And then even after you think that you've really nailed this down and you know exactly what your persona is, that's not the end of the process. You need to be constantly going back and rerunning and redoing this, because your product changes, your competition changes, needs in the industry change. I mean, we just got through 2020 and everything changed in 2020 for just about everyone. And so, if you're selling to the exact same personas that you were at the start of 2020, then you're probably missing something. And so you constantly have to be going through and redoing this. We do a major effort on this every quarter, and we try and do a lighter review every month. I don't know about you guys over there, Reggie.
No. That's actually the same exact cadence that we do major reviews every quarter, and then we do like a monthly review, especially depending on the types of campaigns that we're running, about every month. And you called out something, I think that's really important to highlight when it comes to personas, that they do change over time. I've experienced before, like asking like, okay, well, I've got it set once, so like, can I set it and forget it and just move on? And it's like, not really, because at the end of the day, we're all people. And the human element to this is like really important and really cognizant when it comes to outbound marketing, because people want to be spoken to like they're people. And as the landscape changes and your product changes and things change with it, the pain that your buyer feels will shift. And thus the value that your company brings will shift with it. So being able to really see your different buyers and whatnot will make it much easier to see like, what specific piece of value does my company provide to this specific buyer.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. All right, let's go on to the next P, pain. So we've already hit on this one a little bit, but, and we're going in a specific order for a reason, because based off of the persona, that pain is going to be different. And so you need to look at pain both at a company account level. What is the company overall trying to solve for, but also specific to that person, that role, that decision maker within the organization. So like, with what we both provide, data as well as a tool for being able to build out your campaigns, we have very different people that we're talking to and selling to. Like, end users of both of us oftentimes are individual reps, so account executives, SDRs, but they're rarely the ones making the buying decision.
Exactly.
So, oftentimes that's going to be a director or VP of sales. It could be a head of operations, depending on the size of the company, it could be all the way up to a CEO. You may have a CRO type role in there making budgetary decisions. Each one of those are going to have a different pain point and different things that they're going to be interested in. So what are some of your guys' tricks over there for identifying and defining pain?
Yeah. So I mean, we do it along those lines of like really looking granularly at the different types of pain that folks feel depending on the level, because, we do work with a lot of direct reps who get a lot of benefit out of Reggie, but the person cutting the checks is likely their boss. So the approach we take is like, okay, so since like the pain of the rep, and using Reggie as the example, like the pain of the rep is like they're spending a lot of time trying to determine the workflow, the amount of steps in a campaign, so on and so forth. They're losing a lot of time to that. They're losing a lot of time generating the content. Reggie can come in and help with that. But the pain that their boss might feel is more global than that. So it's more focused on, how's my team performing, or is my team hitting the metrics? Do we have, lower performers here that we need to even out, so on and so forth. And we take an approach to really try to address that pain specifically too. And we go in both directions. So sometimes we'll come in with that higher level decision maker and get straight to that point. Other times we'll come in through the process of the rep, get them really bought into the product so that they'll be a great champion for us internally. And then also in conjunction do a campaign towards that decision maker so that we can nurture that all the way to completion. One thing that we talk a lot about when it comes to pain is just the amount of different pain that a prospect can feel. So thinking about, as you're looking at a campaign, each step stacks upon the next step. So basically, once you've gotten into the 13th or 14th step of your campaign, if you're doing a longer campaign like that, you've had a number of touch points. And the way that we look at it is the pain might be in multitudes through that. So with each new step, you want to add another piece of value that addresses either the same pain point in a different way or a new pain point that they might not be thinking of yet.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, one of the things that I really liked about that is it's not just a matter of what kind of pain. It can also be a magnitude of pain. And so just because something is lower on that scale of magnitude does not mean that it's not something that's important to be addressed, because like you alluded to there, a lot of times there's interrelations between those pain points. And so
Totally.
You may have half a dozen smaller pain points that are interrelated to each other, and when stacked up are actually a bigger pain point than what's whenever you look at it, what is most immediately the biggest pain point. And so you've got to really dig into those and figure out how all of these are related. Another big piece of it is the more that you can take all of these different pain points and different personas and distill that down into one or a handful of coherent stories, the better it's going to be understood, comprehended, and the better you're going to connect. So just because you're breaking it down and getting really, really granular as far as the different personas and the different pain points doesn't mean that that's how you necessarily present the solution. The more that you can go and paint that picture as a whole coherent solution that addresses all of those together, the better it's going to work. And so you can, it's not an either or. You do both sides of it. You try and work the specific ones, but you also try and paint a broader picture with it and bring all of those together as best as possible.
Yeah. And if you're struggling to figure out where to start with that, at a very base, like what your service or organization or product does, and you can address that pain. But there's also what I like to call hidden value or hidden pain that you can find out both through the selling process, but also from your current customers. In my career, I've really thrived on the feedback of others, especially our customers, to figure out you're actually getting this third line benefit that we haven't addressed. And now we can kind of take that arrow and put it in our quiver and use that in our outbound as well, because if it's working for one person, it's more than likely to work for other prospects of yours. So in parsing out those magnitudes, I always encourage people, use all of the data at your exposure, use the no's that you've gotten from your prospecting, use your current customers, use your happy customers, use your new customers, and really try to figure out all of the different areas that you can tackle, and then put that back into your persona matrix so you know where to deploy those arrows.
I don't know about you, but most every time I've gone through that exercise, I find something that I'm surprised about.
Oh yeah, constantly.
Was not even on the radar, did not even have awareness around it.
Yeah. Well, because we're so close to it, and we take it for granted sometimes just how close to it we are, that we really rely on our customers to come in and say hey, we're seeing a ton of value in this area. This is really great, and I love those unlocks. There's nothing more exciting. Like I said, I get excited about the persona building and the matrix, and then I get really excited about adding in the detail on the pain, and then eventually the personalization of these, because you can just really flesh it out so much so quickly.
Which is a great segue into our third P, personalization. So this is really where the rubber meets the road. What do you do with all of that you gathered as far as defining that ICP, those personas, figuring out what their pain points are, and of course this is one that is really, really close to your guys' heart over there, James. So excited to hear what you guys have to say about this one.
Yeah. I remember when I started in this field, years ago, I remember feeling that personalization was really overwhelming. Like, how can I go after all of these people and have something personalized for each of them? And I've realized over time, like, personalization doesn't have to be as hard, and you don't have to spend as much time doing research as you might think you do to establish a personal connection. Mostly because, like, a lot of the information that we would want is readily available via companies' websites, via LinkedIn, and things like that. So, like, thinking about tailoring your approach based around the different personalization levels that you can have, whether it's with a company information or direct prospect information, can really elevate your content in a big way. And it doesn't have to be a ton. It can be a sentence or two here that establishes that you did your research on this person. Personalization is such a key piece to long-term sustainable prospecting. There was a report that came out towards the middle or the end of 2020 that just, like, noted what we all know to be true now, which is 85% of buyers expect there to be some level of personalization or some sort of one-to-one contact in that initial outbound process. And that only increases for cold outbound. So, the things that we recommend is, like, look at the self-authored content that folks have. So, like, things they've posted on LinkedIn, look at the content they're engaging with to try to get a gauge for, like, their interests, which kind of bleeds into, like, self-identified traits. Like, these are the things that I enjoy. These are the topics I'm interested in. And then, feel free to tie that all nice up in a bow with the company info or, like, some of the buyer intent data that you can get from like Sales Intel.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think one of the keys to personalization that a lot of people get bogged down or intimidated by is there's also tiers of personalization that you can do. And so at the very highest level, it's company level personalization. But that doesn't even have to be specific to the company. It can be things like firmographics. Where's the company located? What industry are they in?
Mm-hmm.
What's their competition? What's their size? Are they enterprise? Are they mid-market? Are they SMB? And these are all big things that you can do to personalize at scale, because that's stuff that's really, really easy to pull in at the company level and be able to then use for segmentation for that personalization. And then from there, you can go down to personalization at the persona level. So you can do based off of like title, role, job hierarchy, stuff like that. And again, there's going to be an interplay between those, because those personas are going to differ, even with the same title, are going to differ based off of the industry or company size and stuff like that. And then you can take it all the way down to the most nuanced, the most detail, which is stuff personal to that individual. So that's where you were talking about, like, what have they commented on? What have they written? What have they engaged with on LinkedIn, stuff like that. And then one of the really advanced level ones is one of the ones you hit on, which is intent data. And for people that aren't familiar with intent data, you actually are familiar with it. You just may not be familiar with the term. So we're all using intent data, whether we realize it or not. So whenever you're looking at traffic to your website, or who's coming into it, or who's filling out your forms, or are people opening your emails or clicking on links, filling out forms, those are all intent signals. They're just intent signals specific to you and your organization. Intent, like James and I have been talking about, is a little bit broader, and it typically refers to data providers that give you signals of intent outside of your own personal website, your own personal content. So this is, what are people searching for online? What specific pages are they visiting? What type of content are they consuming? Stuff like that. And so you're looking at that versus a baseline across, not, in some cases they'll do it at the individual level. There's a lot of debate of, whether that's more noise than signal. But at most do it at the company level. So looking for intent signals that are coming from the company itself. So, if they go from not really interested at all in an ABM platform, for instance, to all of a sudden, lots of people at that organization are consuming lots of content, and a lot of that content is about, like, types of ABM platforms or strategies for implementing ABM, stuff like that, then that's a pretty strong signal. And then you can speak to that. Similar story, another advanced one is using something like technographics. So what's the technology footprint? What's their tech stack look like? Because a lot of times those pain points are going to be tied pretty closely to the tech that they've invested in and what they're leveraging internally. And so anytime you've got the ability to speak to that, especially if you're somebody like, us or James over at Reggie, where you have specific technologies that you play particularly nice with, then that gives you a huge leg up to be able to talk about not only the pain points, but also how you solve those specific to those technologies that they're leveraging and using.
Oh yeah.
So really, good.
No, I was just going to say, I totally agree with you. And like the technology aspect is something that we look at a lot because, with Reggie, we know that there's a technology bloat in the world right now, and we want to be able to come in and have everything seamlessly talk to each other. So the more information that you know on that, the more you can tailor your approach that way. And I think it's really fantastic, not only from the technology side, but just going on all of the type of firmographic data that you can gather now to really make your outreach personal. And it's important, and I always like to call this out, it's important even if you're doing mostly inbound campaigns. You can always improve your inbound follow-up process to be more personal, to be more pain relevant, and so on and so forth. And I think like the more that you take the time to use the data and the tools that you've gathered either yourself or by using a third party, the better off you'll be when it comes to being able to personalize at scale.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is equally applicable for inbound and outbound, because all of this stuff that you're doing around the 3Ps needs to feed into the content that you're creating, both to enable your outbound efforts, but also the content that you're using to drive those inbound form fills and that inbound interest. So again, use all of that. So we've spent quite a bit of time talking already about how to put all of this together. We can probably keep this one pretty short so we can make sure we've got some time for Q&A. But what are some of your, if you had to pick just a couple of your best practices or best tips for how do you bring all these pieces together and actually execute, what would those be?
Well, the thing I would say first is like don't overcomplicate it for yourself, because overcomplicating it for yourself in the beginning can really just be a hurdle that is so tough to get over. Start small, start with a couple of buyer personas and really map out what pain you solve for those customers. And then begin your outreach that way. And where it really comes together, I think, really strong outreach comes from the tech stack. And personally, like my ideal tech stack for something like this is a database similar to a sales intel, some system that I can send emails and track different tasks, whether it's calls or LinkedIn follow-ups in. And then something to help write the sequences and determine what I actually need to be putting in, like Reggie.
Absolutely. And yeah, I agree. Don't bite off too much all at once. Start simple, start wide. I've seen way too many people put in way too much time and effort into segmentation and personalization, only to realize like, oh crap, like that audience that I just spent all that time and effort for is really, really minuscule. I don't have anybody to reach out to. That's not going to move the needle. Or hey, we really thought this was going to be really, really important or a huge pain point, but after we started running campaigns, we realized nobody really cared. So, start wide, start simple, and then look again for those signals from the data to figure out what worked and what didn't. And again, keep asking questions. Just because something worked or it didn't, that's really the first step, not the last step. From there, you need to be asking why. Something I used to do all the time whenever I was a professor. I used to always say, like, if you haven't asked why about 5 times, then you're not getting to the level that you really need to be at, and you really need to be doing that sort of scientific.
Yeah. You took the words right out of my mouth with that. I mean, asking the 5 whys is such a powerful thing to do, both during the selling process and during the post-sales process. I mean, continue to ask questions of the people around you because you'll learn things that you didn't know before, and then you'll be able to implement those things very intelligently.
Yep. Cool. So we've got a question already in here from Jenna. Please go ahead and drop anything that you have in for us. Like I said, we can hang around as long as you guys have good questions. Jenna's asking, what type of outreach do you find works best? I can take a quick shot at this and then I'll hand it over to you, James. You'll have more insight into this than I will. For me, the answer is very simple. It's all of the above. The data out there supports pretty strongly as you add more channels to your outreach, the more effective it's going to be. So, the stats are if you add 3 additional channels to your outreach to take it from 1 to 4, you're typically going to see a 4x increase in engagement and response rates. And keep in mind, even if 90% of people are responding to your emails or getting back to you on LinkedIn or you're getting them on the phone, and it seems like that one channel is the only thing that's effective, do not get fooled by that. Those other channels are helping to drive them to engage in that channel that you're happening to get them on. And for a lot of people, they have a certain channel that they're particularly engaged and active on, and the others are going to be crickets for them. So do it across the board, but also hone in on what's really effective for certain industries, for certain ICPs, certain types of companies, but also certain roles. I mean, I'll talk in broad strokes here, but over a lot of time working in the industry, I've noticed salespeople like to get on the phone. That's typically a good place to get a salesperson. Marketers, we tend to be most engaged via email. Like most of them are like me. If you call off of a number that they don't know, they're going to screen you. So you're going to be unlikely to get a marketer on the phone. Some people are really, really engaged on LinkedIn and social, and some are not. So a broad strokes across the board approach to it. And also certain mediums are obviously better for certain types of messaging.
Yeah, 1000%. You hit the nail on the head. It really is all of the above, and you can't discount any of the steps because like we kind of talked about earlier, it all stacks upon each other. And another good thing to think about and not getting fooled by that is like the one thing you can't predict is you can't always predict individual human behavior. So you want to be able to like have touch points in place to make sure that you're not leaving anything on the table for your prospects. I always think about additional things on top of that. You've got email, you've got phone calls, you've got LinkedIn touches, but then you can also pepper in things like a quick 30-second video. That's something that we deploy a lot when we're working with prospects. It's just like hey, it's James from Reggie, just wanted to send you a quick note, see how you were doing. And that things like that go over well with a certain type of buyer. And then, that extrapolates out for us into the actual workflow, because the thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to just throw all of your touch points, into a basket and just randomly pick them out. You want it to be structured in a way that the follow-up cadence on it, isn't too frequent or too infrequent, and it's varied enough that people are getting touched in different ways. Because even if they don't respond to one touch point, when the touch point comes that they will respond to, they'll remember that you did that other outreach and your name will become familiar to them. And help that light bulb go off.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest mistakes I see people making, both in sales sequences and in marketing, is that that fear of like, oh, am I going to annoy people? And full caveat, yes, you can do that. You can be over the top and annoying, but more often I see people veering too far on the other side of being wary of and scared of it. And what happens that people don't realize is if you're not top of mind and if that cadence is not frequent enough, then effectively it makes each touch a first touch because they don't remember who you are. They don't remember anything that's happened before. And so, instead of having multiple touches that are building on each other and driving to a conversion, you just have a whole lot of first touches, which ironically for a lot of people becomes more annoying than staying on top of them.
Exactly.
It's that first touch that really tends to annoy people most. And so, definitely take that into consideration whenever you're getting really antsy about how much you're touching people. Cool. We got another one here from Mike. He's saying, I understand how you might use the 5 why technique once in a meeting. How would you use that in your sequencing messaging? The way I was talking about using the 5 whys was not even directing it at a potential customer or a prospect. It's directing it internally. So, as you uncover something, as you find something interesting in the data, don't just take that as your conclusion. Ask, why did that happen? So, we ran a campaign and it was targeted at InfoSec companies, and that just fell flat. Don't just take the answer as we shouldn't target InfoSec. Ask questions, create hypotheses as to why that happened. Was the product not there? Were you missing a specific feature? Were you off on what your pain point was? Were you trying to aim at the wrong decision maker? Was there something wrong in your data? Did you have a whole bunch of companies labeled as InfoSec that are not actually InfoSec? There can be all kinds of different explanations for it. And you don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. And on the flip side, even if it's a positive or success signal, you need to figure out why was that successful.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. Like looking at what works and asking the 5 whys about what has worked and what hasn't worked, just internally can be just a great treasure trove of unlocking there. And then, more so along the lines of the ways that I was referencing it, I was talking a lot of like post sales, like asking the why and like really trying to drill the value there. But during the sales process, when you're in that environment, when you're on the meeting, if you feel like it's going in a direction where like, okay, the initial value that I thought they would see with this, they're not seeing. You can ask questions about their process, about their organization, about their people, to try to dig a little bit deeper on what their pain might be and like a different angle by which you could go in and solve that pain and provide value.
Brian was asking if I had data to support my hypothesis that marketers are more responsive to email. I do not, Brian. That is just my own anecdotal experience. But it's a great question, and it would honestly be an excellent study to run sometime. So I need to look at my list of partners and figure out who would most likely have the data around that. But yeah, that would be a really fascinating study to do. I'll get back to you, Brian, when I get that study done and have something better than an anecdote for you.
Yeah, to piggyback on that a little bit, one of the things that we do that doesn't quite get as granular as your example, but the way that our system and our databases worked is we've looked at, all of the buyer personas that exist, and we've mapped them out against the most common DISC personality profiles of those different buyers. So, the way that you go and approach a VP is going to be different from the way you approach a manager. And within Reggie, the way that we've built that AI is based on the input that you put on your buyer persona. You'll then get the recommendations on like the tone you should be taking with them, so on and so forth, to help get to that.
Cool. We had somebody asking about exactly what I was talking about as far as cadence. Asking, is it better to do a 7-step sequence over 60 days versus over 2 weeks? How many steps do you believe are best? 7 is usually the minimum. And for context, targeting developers and technical folks, they react differently. So one, absolutely, you're absolutely right. Developers and technical folks are very different. Salespeople, marketers, people in front of the house, tend to be a lot more used to this type of thing. And so from my experience, you may want to tone it down a little bit whenever you're going for, technical people on the back end. That's, again, just my anecdote. I don't have data behind that. But in general, when I'm building out a sequence, I'm definitely interested to hear yours as well, James. I aim for at least 2 to 3 touches a week. At a minimum, you need to be touching them once a week. So 7-step sequence over 60 days is going to be way too long of a time horizon. The 7 steps is going to be a lot more like, a 2-week type campaign. Typically what I'm seeing these days is somewhere between like 12 and 18 steps in a sequence. And then typically that's over like a, somewhere between a 3 to 6 week process. And again, you're mixing a lot of that stuff in there. So, for instance, you may have 3 touches in a single day. You may make a phone call in the morning and not leave a voicemail. And then you may send an email, and you may have a phone call in the afternoon and leave a voicemail. That's obviously 3 touches in a single day. It's really easy if you're doing, a multi-touch day like that, and then some follow-up to do, 4 or 5 touches in a single week. Obviously, you don't want to do that level every single week, but you start to see how this can play out pretty quickly as far as number of touches over a relatively short period of time.
1000%. And then, the way that we look at it is, with Reggie, what we're doing is, when you go in, you can actually see the steps and the days that are tied to each type with a different use case. And we regularly update those to make sure that as new types of prospecting come in and out of vogue, that they're present in the system. But as an example, like our standard multi-touch campaign, which virtually all of our customers take advantage of, is just 15 steps over 27 days. And that's kind of the average there. But if we were going to do something that was more of a slow burn, perhaps geared towards like higher level executives, we would maybe do 18 steps over 60 days, drag that out a little bit there. And then with each of those, that would still have a multitude of different types of touch points in there, whether it's email, LinkedIn, phone call, so on and so forth.
Yeah, and you also made a great point there. I mean, you want to tailor that based off of your persona, your audience. We also, in an ideal world, want to tailor that off of where they are in the funnel. So if you've got somebody really high up the funnel where you're trying to educate them and nurture them and stuff like that, then you may want to err on the side of, fewer touches, or not fewer touches, but, touches less often. And then obviously you want to focus on the type of touches that you're doing, those being value add educational touches. Versus if you've got somebody that came in and they filled out a form to request a demo, you want to stay on top of those people. So, you may be doing 2-3 touches a day for the, and doing that daily or every other day for the first week or 2 weeks, because whatever drove them to come in, they were hot at that time. And so you want to do everything in your power to get back in front of that person before they've gone and made a decision or gone someplace else or something like that. So again, keep tailoring the stuff, go back to the data, see what's working, what's not. Also look at your campaigns, look at, always be testing both the content that's in them as well as the cadences in it. So look at how those are performing. Are there certain steps that are working well, or are there certain sequences, as far as the cadence within it, as far as the touches within it, that are working better than others? I mean, the more that you've got data and the more you dig into that data, the better you're going to be in getting away from those anecdotes about what seems to work and more towards, what actually concretely does work.
Yeah, and that's why like the data review at the end of any campaign you run is so important. So you can start to parse out and figure out like, okay, like for this particular persona, I really need to be, letting them burn a little bit slower over a longer amount of time, but make sure I'm continuing to add value versus somebody, a buyer that you can get into within 14 days.
Yeah. Well, cool. I'll let everybody have one last chance for a question. We have, one more out of the regular chat. They're asking clarification of what we mean by the why. The why is exactly, imagine a 8-year-old kid going, "Why is the sky blue?" Sky's blue because that's the way that light refracts off of air. Well, why? You're asking, every time you have an answer to that why, you're asking another why. And so that's where the 5 whys come in. You're going 5 levels deep on an explanation. And typically by the time you've gotten that deep, you're starting to get close to something interesting.
Yeah. So like, Jason, you say that you're feeling this pain, and I ask, okay, well, what's causing that pain? And then you tell me what's causing that pain. And I'm like, okay, well, how do these 2 things interconnect with that? And then you slowly dig deeper till you get to the heart of it, and then you can address it really well.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for joining us. James, this has been fantastic. I love it whenever we get to do something conversational and thought leadership like this.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I said, we'll get an email out to you guys tomorrow. It'll have a link to the recap page. It will have the recording as well as the deck on it. You can reply to that email if you've got any additional questions for myself or James. Obviously, our contact information is on the final slide of the deck, so you can reach out to us there. Happy to help in any way that we can with any of it.
Yeah, and I would add, for anybody that's listening to this, one special thing that we're offering for folks who attended this webinar or view it later on is, will via Reggie build your first campaign for you totally for free. So if you want to take advantage of that, please reach out to me or Jason and we'll get you sorted.
Awesome. All right. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Jason. This is